Good morning, Quasar Markets Live. Thank God it's Friday, everybody. Hope you're having a good start to your weekend with our Friday morning updates here at Quasar Markets. So far, it's a little bit of a mixed bag as we look around, starting in the overnight foreign markets. What did we see? We've seen some pretty strong performance overall overseas overnight. If we take a look here, we see that the Nikkei, Japan's stock market, moved up nicely here over the last several days. It is right towards where its key resistance has been here, going back to mid-October. We haven't seen a break above these zones on the Nikkei since, mid-July. So it looks like it's trying to run. We're seeing a little bit of the breathing room in foreign markets as the US dollar has come down a little bit, softened. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second here. Following there, you got Shanghai Composite. Mostly been in a consolidated stage. We haven't seen a breakout here like we have in the Nikkei or the stocks yet. So those of you looking for the next market to maybe make a move up, if we see a little bit more, breathing room out of the Dixie and so forth, could be the Shanghai markets. We talked a little bit about that with Stephen Flanagan last week, or the other day. We'll talk more today with him on that. And then if we look at the stocks, again, it's really been moving up here since, December 20th, basically. It's been on a move to the upside. Novo Nordisk is going to be a big factor in that today. We'll talk a little bit there. They are moving up tremendously as they have seen a FDA approval for a new drug there. So we'll take a look at that. But foreign markets have been moving up. With that being said, so far, our futures not looking as positive here in the U.S. We're basically flat on the QQQ, stuck right around this 532 level. That was pretty much, it closed at the high of the day yesterday at 533.80 it broke to a high yesterday at 533.80 or so. That's going to be our key level to try to get above. I will say it still seems a little bullish for me here on QQQ today, as we were able to close up above the levels that has been the big resistance here in this zone here. So we finally got a little bit of a higher close here. Could give us a little bit of a buoy today if we can see some momentum come into the markets. SPY right now is just slightly down also. It did make a breakout to a new all-time high yesterday. So again, the S&P broke to a new all-time high. We've talked about if it can hold above the 609 area here today, look for an extended move, to the half measured move mark, which would be, why is that not doing it for me? Half measured move would be at about 622 would be our next, if we put our analyst hat on, so to speak, next spot we'd be looking here to target would be in that 621.87 area here on the SPY on an upward move and break through this resistance. And, yesterday's high, again, new all-time high, 609.75. So we can see a move there above 610 today. Look for a run towards that area. First level of support on the downside comes in right around that 600 level, maybe a little bit higher. I'd say 600 to 601.95 or so would be the key supports to watch on any kind of slide today, downward on the SPY. Gold broke to right towards a new all-time high. Did not break it. Got to 27.8466 here. But as you can see, it has broken that key resistance area that we saw here. So I pointed out yesterday that unlike the other days, we had seen a little bit of a consolidation here over, the last 4 or 5 days before we got a breakout. So this breakout looks like it could have some legs. It's at its historical high here. So you definitely got to be aware there if you are in a gold trade on gold. Personally, I would be looking here to definitely get some protection, either a trailing stop in there or just taking profits here towards that 27.90. I don't know that we have anything that should push us into a bigger way above that level, and get us above that 3,000 level. We just haven't been able to do it. So, my first inclination would be not really probably able to do it here today, so we'll take a look. But gold looking solid. Silver, same story, man. Silver's been in the same area. Can't not break 31 handle. It gets up to that 31 handle. You can see almost daily here going back to January 15th, and it just gets knocked right down at that 31 level. So that still seems to be the zone of resistance here that just weighs heavily on silver, unable to really break out of that zone so far. So silver still holding in that position. Talk a little bit about nat gas. It has pulled back here this morning. It's now gone up a little bit here in the last 20 minutes or so, but you can see here it's been pulling back pretty much since about 10 a.m. yesterday. We've been on a steady hourly decline when it comes to natural gas. We're right in that 390 area again. It's not in an area that I personally am looking to trade it. If I see it move down towards this 370 area, it gets a little bit more interesting for a play back up to the north side. And any kind of move up towards that 440, 450 area, though, would have me looking at a short using UNG as my proxy there. UNG right now trading at about 1785. So it's right in the middle of a support zone right now. We'll see if that holds. If it doesn't, comes back down towards the 16 area. It does get interesting in that level. So we'll take a look there. Treasuries, I don't think the president is very happy this morning. Yesterday, he made a big point in his talk to Davos about how he was going to inform the Fed that they needed to lower rates. He didn't do it in that nice of a tone. I believe his exact terms was, I am going to demand that the Fed cut rates. It hasn't turned into much. We had seen rates drop a little bit yesterday. They are sort of stagnant, moving up a little bit here. This morning, not a ton of movement though, as you can see. We bottomed out in that 4.611 area, now back around 465. Any break above this 4664 sends us back up towards that 48, in my opinion. So, we'll keep an eye. They're not giving us the breathing room that you would need to see mortgages really move or anything else that's going to get the advantage of these interest rates so far. So we'll see what we get there. Good morning there, Ron. Oh, yeah, you're watching the Davos video? Nice. For those that don't know, take a look at our X channel or our YouTube channel. We have a couple of interviews with our founder and CEO, Big Beat there. In fact, he asked Ray Dalio a few questions yesterday about Bitcoin. We have that video up, and then I interviewed him yesterday morning and just got his, more broader views of what is happening over there at Davos. So Steve will be back next week and on the show, ready to tell everybody about what's going on. So we will keep that in mind. US dollar, actually, while the rates aren't moving to the downside, the Dixie has been here. Dixie down at 107.69. And you can see overnight broke to a low that we hadn't seen since mid-December. So definitely seeing downside so far on the Dixie in the US dollar. We'll see if it continues. Did quickly bounce back up, regain that key support that Steve Flanagan talked about at 107.53 and just above the 50-day MA currently. So we'll see what we get here. Can that hold? Quite honestly, if it falls, it gives us a little bit more breathing room for some of these commodities, gold, Bitcoin, everything else to maybe catch some more upwind here today. Big gainer against the US dollar was really the euro and the sterling, were the two that have moved, the most to the upside here against the US dollar this morning. And again, at 10 o'clock, we'll have Stephen Flanagan in to talk more about currencies. As we take a look at the Spider Select funds that cover the 11 different sectors of the S&P 500, we do see a mixed bag, mostly looking to open to the downside. Real estate, which we know got hit pretty hard yesterday, early, and then recovered later in the day, showing some strength again today. We also see XLY, which is consumer discretionary, up slightly. XLP, consumer staples, and lastly XLK, the technology sector, up a little bit here. But but not a ton of good movement there. We have seen some earnings. We'll get into those in a few seconds here and take a look at what's going on individually. It is definitely in a stock picker's market here. We have seen some great earnings move, some things to the upside. Less than stellar earnings has had things dropping. So we'll talk a little bit more about what was affected by the earnings reports here over the next few minutes. Bitcoin regained 105,000 overnight. Solid move up. You'll see it happen during just as Asian markets sort of opened here at 10 p.m. We had a nice move up. And then we've maintained most of that momentum, trading mostly sideways in a fairly consolidated zone between 104 and 105 right now. I will say open interest still extremely high, above $150 billion there, and liquidations remaining high, over 330 million dollars liquidated in the last 24 hours on perpetual futures. Does look like traders are ramping up leverage a little bit, getting a little bit more risky, and they are finding out that is not generally a good idea. And I think part of that has to do with yesterday. President Trump did come out and sign his executive orders in regards to crypto. We're not going to go too much into them today. I'm still digesting all of it and sort of getting my feedback out of Capitol Hill on it. But in general, he did put in place the sort of footprint for being able to do a strategic digital asset reserve. Bitcoiners are upset because it is not limited to Bitcoin. It does say a basket of digital assets. So a little bit of worry there. As to what that means. Bitcoin maximalists not liking it. Are we going to stuff this thing full of, meme coins and stuff? We don't want to see that. The other thing that came out yesterday was the retraction of staff accounting bulletin number 122. I have tweeted a bunch about this because there's two sides to this one. This means now that banks will be able to safeguard or custody crypto for their customers, and they had been a direction under the Biden administration that did not allow that. So the two things I do want to point out here, number one, we need regulations and rules of the road in place before banks jump into this in a big way, or we risk really fracturing the markets and having issues. We don't want to see what the mortgage markets did to the banking industry and financial sector in 2008 happened here in crypto. We know that banks are the masters of leverage, right? They take little bits amounts of money and they leverage it over and over again and rehypothecate how that works to be able to, increase money supply basically, or to loan money out and everything else. I am a little nervous that without getting that set up properly with guidelines in place, that could be a problem. I will stay in crypto for a few seconds here. It was good to see that Senator Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming is going to be the chair of a subcommittee on digital assets in the Senate Banking Committee. So that's good to see. She has a good handle on it. She's a Bitcoin maximalist, so it's going to be interesting to see how she feels about these other coins being included in it. But there is a lot going on. When it comes to crypto for sure, and the new administration, we'll see how that all plays out. But I do think that a lot of traders yesterday loaded up on leverage, thinking that this, and there was a lot of hype. The one thing I'm not so thrilled with when it comes to the crypto world is they have been really hyping up every announcement that's coming out. Most of these announcements were things that were known was going to happen, especially this, the bank custody things. The Trump transition team signaled that early on that was going to happen. But yesterday we saw all things that, were, 10 o'clock announcement, huge announcement at 10 o'clock, huge announcement at 11 o'clock, huge announcement here. And they, while they are big movements, big for the movement of crypto, and it's great to see, they aren't these earth-shattering news. It's been more, it wasn't a sell the news day where we dropped on this stuff, but it also wasn't a take off and blast off as some people thought there. So, you keep that in mind. There wasn't a huge amount of that. Across the rest of the crypto market, we're seeing mostly green in general as we look across. I see Binance coin down. A couple of the meme coins, including Trump's coin, are down. but in general, most of the top 100 projects are up. And again, what we're seeing is that things that were down yesterday are up the most today, being led by Solana, which we know had taken that fall yesterday. I mentioned if you were looking for a mean reversion trade, that was probably one to take a look at. Dropped down to 242, back up at 268 here and looking to climb to the north side. Nothing else really there that worries me or that matters all that much. Okay, we are about 15 minutes from open. Let's start to talk about what is moving the market so far today. Largest riser so far this morning on the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100 is Steel Dynamics, up about 3% here. They announced that they are working. Well, so they had earnings yesterday. Their earnings yesterday was a top line revenue miss, but it was a beat on the EPS of about 5%. And what they did talk about that I think has the market, sort of moving in a positive direction when it comes to it is the fact that they are talked about a new steel mill in Texas and a new aluminum rolling plant in Mississippi. So they are still building out their infrastructure. And we know that, part of the talk of the new administration, or what has been just been the talk of the industry over the last few years, has been about how the steel industry has been in retraction. So maybe this moves it. We're starting to see a little bit of money be spent. We're starting to see the infrastructure money be sent. So maybe we do see a move to these infrastructure plays a little bit. As we look at the tick so far, pretty neutral. We are nicely up on advanced decline here today. So we do have a nice move to the upside so far. VIX still under 15 here, so it does, those looking to buy some protection for this volatility, you might be able to do it. And breaking down a little bit more on that Steel Dynamics, their CEO said that underlying steel demand was stable throughout 2024, but noted that supply and demand dynamics were hurt by imports of products, especially coated flat steel roll, which puts pressure on prices. He feels that the dynamics are expected to improve in 2025, and he thinks it's going to be a positive commercial environment for steel, citing declining imports and increasing North American demand. So solid forward guidance there out of Steel Dynamics has them as the number one moving up so far here this morning. Another one that's up nicely is Arista, up about 3.78% here. And I do have a news article on that. Give me 1 second here to pull it up. And the big news on Arista was just that they are getting the upwinds from that Stargate deal is the big takeaway that they sort of had there. They are a computer peripheral company, but up about 3.64%. I do want to grab, sorry, I want to get you something to take a look at here. We talked a little bit about the data centers and what is going on there with, as we know, a huge amount of new data centers being built here in the US over the coming years. And everybody's sort of focused in on, the companies that will benefit the most from that. I found a pretty good infographic here I put up on Quasar Markets that brought up some of the companies you might want to take a look at that you maybe don't expect to do it. And what they talked about is, power distribution. Look at ABB, Schneider Electric, Siemens, Hitachi. the LV power distribution within that. Look at Veritiv, MPS, Mitsubishi Electric. Backup power will be needed for these data centers. That's companies like Generac, GE, and CAT. They're going to need server cabinets. That's companies like Fujitsu, Vertiv, Dell, Oracle. They're going to need UPS or uninterruptible power systems. Rolls-Royce, Vertiv again, Generac again involved in there. They need security systems for these data centers. That's Palo Alto, Siemens, Bosch, and others. HVAC solutions. Again, you've got to keep these data centers at a cool temperature. All those peripherals throw off a ton of energy, a ton of heat. So companies like Legrand, Munters, Vertiv again, when you see some of these have multiple mentions in here, some of the ones like Generac for sure, Vertiv for sure, IBM, these are companies that show up in multiple different things. We've talked about it. The picks and shovels of these data centers are, to me, ones that are definitely going to be beneficiaries. They're not as sexy as some of the other ones you see over there. So, could be a good opportunity here with, with some of those. So those are definitely the ones that I will be keeping an eye on and looking more into, seeing over the next couple of weeks and months, who, looking to see if any contracts are announced as they start to give us some information about these companies. We'll take a look there. Yeah, Ron, these are basically just for the actual data centers. These are when you build a data center, you need to have MV power distribution. You need to have your backup power. You need to have an uninterruptible power source, in case it goes down. You need your security systems. Building automation is another one that they talked about with Legrand and Mitsubishi Electric again, Cisco. Again, as I talked about, you got to keep them cool. So you need your HVAC solutions. And then the sort of things that you put all of those lovely NVIDIA chips and, IBM computers and Dell computers into, server cabinets, cable companies, Ethernet cables. The amount of cables, if you've ever seen in these data centers, is just immense. So these are some of the not sexy names that I think we're going to want to keep an eye on as we do get, moving here. So this was a good one. We'll look at some of these names. I'm actually going to make a watch list here on my trading view with all of these names. So we'll keep an eye and look for some entries and some good things there. So, but that's definitely what you want to look at is, don't just think about the chips as, the next set in those data centers. All of this infrastructure, again, none of these buildings they're talking about going into are built yet. These are, these aren't like they're going to retrofit or they're already empty buildings and they're just saying, hey, there's an empty building in New York City and I'm going to put a data center there. They are very strategically placed where there is excess energy or very cheap energy available, usually very, very close to the energy source. We see them being built directly next to solar, arrays in West Texas. We see them built near hydroelectric plants in the Pacific Northwest. We see them, by the coal plants, even still in Pennsylvania. They tend to go to those areas where they, where there's stranded energy, there's cheap energy, or, and especially now they're trying to work with green energy, whether it be, methane, flaring even from the oil and gas drilling is being used to that's more for Bitcoin mining than the data centers themselves. But these data centers are surely going to go up in areas, that don't have it so far. So you're going to see a lot of cables needed, a lot of infrastructure needed to support those areas. And this is all going to be the areas that will Yeah, Ron just added in there for those that are not following on YouTube to keep your eye on water also, that water treatment plants for the data centers. Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk a little bit more about it as it goes too. You've seen companies like Mara from the Bitcoin mining companies. They're actually taking the excess heat that comes from their Norway facilities and they are turning that into steam energy or steam heat that is then is providing energy for an entire city in Norway. So there are some interesting things that will come as side plans to this. We heard, Elizabeth Warren and all those folks rally that Bitcoin mining was so terrible for the environment. And then just recently in the EU, it's been pointed out that Bitcoin mining has been one of the most best use cases for clean energy, that they've, gone towards the clean energy. Involved in water. That's ones I'll have to look there. I got to do a channel check on that, Mr. Flanagan. I don't know who does the water treatment. Ron, do you have an idea on that one? Give me 1 second. I will look and see if I can find that quickly here for us. Good morning there, Steve. Good to see you. It looks like the top ones, American Water would be one, Viola Environment. So there are a few here. Ecolab. So Ecolab would be a player in that field. That's interesting. So here we go. I actually was able to find on money.us news a pretty good setup here. Let me pull this over here. So you do have some public tickers you can take a look at here. Whoa. You've got American Waterworks, AWK. In fact, I'm going to write these down so we can take a look at them. AWK, Pentier, which is PNR. And my pen, of course, doesn't want to write. There's my big pen. PNR, GWRS, VMI, and FO. IWTR. So a couple of things. So that you notice down here, a couple of things I like that I see is if you are looking to get into maybe just an ETF, there's a couple down the bottom here. You have Invesco Water Resources, PHO, and iShares MSCI Water Management Multi-Sector, IWTR. I personally would be looking here for individual ones. Ron points out VLTO, another one that's a player in this. That's good to know, Ron. We'll take a look there. Let me put that on my notes here. VLTO. But they are definitely plays in that space. That, like I said, this infrastructure that's being built out is going to be a huge amount of electronic components that you don't necessarily think about that go into these data centers. It's not all chips and computers. It is, everything that is going to go into them. Tick we are about 2 minutes from the open. We are seeing a little bit of a pullback here. Tick slightly negative. Our advanced decline about 1,100. We were up as high as 1,400 earlier. So it does look like we're getting a little bit of a pullback. Haven't seen any real news to that as to anything going on as I look around at all my screens here to see if anything's popping. Not really. Not really any important earnings reports. I will say TXN was one that we talked about a little bit yesterday that hit earnings overnight last night. It has pulled back. And again, I mentioned this on our Slack channel. They had a good EPS up 7.61%. Top end revenues exceeded expectations by 3.16%, but it's pulling back. What we've seen lately, in my personal opinion, is the later you are in earnings reports right now, the harder it is to impress the retail market, or just the market in general, has been what I've seen. So, early earnings reports that show positive growth, positive guidance, we see it just taking the market off. We saw it in banks, JP Morgan, and all those. We saw it when Taiwan Semiconductor went off. Everything just jumped. And what we're seeing now is still good earnings reports aren't good enough. We sort of it's almost like the market tires and says, okay, you only beat by 5%, TSM beat by 7%. So I'm selling off. So we do see that. I also think part of the problem there, retail traders tend to try to, again, they get FOMO, right? They see a couple of these chip companies have good earnings reports, and then the next one coming up, they want to dump money into that, just before earnings, and think they're going to catch that same candle. Doesn't tend to happen there. So we are open. What are we going to get here on the first couple of ticks? We're going to take a look at QQQ. I want to see if tech can buoy a little bit today. We know it was a little bit of a laggard yesterday. It did finish up, but only slightly up. So far, it does look like a little bit of a move to the upside. Doesn't actually look like my trading view is updating properly here. Let me move trading view around a little bit. Sometimes you got to play with it to get it to go. There we go. So we are opening up a little bit to the positive side. I don't know why TradingView does that. But I had to go to a different screen to get the screens to all work. 532.82 here. I do think you've got strong resistance at this 535, 537 area above us that we just don't seem to be able to break above right now. So again, do we get any kind of news today that jumps us above? We'll see. Doesn't seem to me like there is enough momentum so far in the markets to move it. I don't know that we have a ton of short covering we'll see today. What we'll have to watch for is, expiries across the board. Do we see something there today? And does that move the needle? But so far, we are looking like we're going to open up slightly up and moving again. Tick is slightly negative. Advanced decline is up only 700 now. So a lot of those things that weren't trading in the pre-markets initial reaction was to the downside. We're going to keep a close eye on advanced decline. I think if we can see that pick up, get above 1,500 again here, we start to see a positive day in general. Try to move, don't save. Take a look at what's moving the most here as we're opening up. I do want to take this down just to the top stocks. I'm not looking at the penny pumpers here. We will later on. So biggest winners so far here after open, Moderna up 3.5%. Have to wonder, we'll pull up the news on Novo Nordisk. And let me pull up that stock. That would make sense too. We did see NVO was moving up, after its earnings here this morning, was moving up to after their announcement that they had a new drug that had gotten approved here. Let me pull out again. Sorry, I'm just got to get the story up here. Sorry about this. Had some internet problems this morning here. There we go. And they announced that data for a new weight loss drug that appeared to be more efficient than even blockbuster Ozempic and Wegovy that are on the markets. So they are, rallying big time here, up, almost 10% here. It is pulling back. So we are seeing a little bit of profit taking here last couple of hours. It made a move back up towards that 93 area, but has been dropping down. Let's take a look at the Mag 7. NVIDIA continuing to climb up. Steve and I are still in our positions there. I'm in at 142 and change. Looking for me, I'm looking for a move above 150 here. So going to continue to hold NVIDIA. Apple has bounced back up to the 224 handle here, up about almost half a percentage point. Microsoft getting hit pretty hard here. Not sure why that is happening here, except that it shot up. They were one of the big winners in the Stargate sort of jump up there after that AI announcement. So they are moving a little bit down there with that. Netflix pulling back. So Netflix hasn't been able to hold above that $1,000 mark. It broke it briefly on its earnings report, and it has pulled back down. And honestly, has had trouble breaking 980 since that. So you've got some pretty strong resistance starting, or sell pressure right at that 980 area here when it comes to Netflix. That's going to be your zone to watch. Not sure I'd be shorting it, but more about being on where, if you are in your position there, that 980 zone seems to be the tough spot for it. And as we said, Ron, you just said it too, TXN is absolutely taking a beating here, down about 6.77%. And if I pull up, I have their earnings reports here. Texas Instruments, their company on the conference call said that the auto end of their markets, where they do a lot of their sort of components into in Europe, US, and Japan, continued to be weak. They expect earnings of between 94 cents and $1.16 a share in the first quarter, which was below the former expectation of 117. So they're now saying on the top end, they're hoping to hit what was the mid-level expectation. And again, they are now saying that they're going to do a little less in top line revenue. So getting hit pretty hard here. Could be one that could be interesting for, again, a play to the upside, but I'd want to see it get back down towards this 184 area before I'd be jumping in there. Tick continuing to slide, and advanced decline is sitting at about 650 here. We do see QQQ has gone negative. The Dow is slightly negative. The RUT is slightly negative. The SPY is the only thing holding up here. That's holding up at 610. So the SPY is the winner so far. Again, my next target on the SPY is 622. Which would be a half measured move up. It's already made. This is, it's taken time, but it's made its 2 measured moves up. This would be the 3rd measured move that's made on this sort of bullish run. So we'll see. Bitcoin catching some wind here this morning. 105,350 right now, holding up pretty well. Gold still can't break to that new all-time high, that 2790, man. That just seems like it just can't get across 2790. I haven't really talked about oil. Expectations are that oil prices are going to continue to climb a little bit here. They are sitting in the mid 70s, 74.95 on WTI. Did regain the 200-day MA there, moving back up a little bit. Bank of America is the other position that I am still in here. Didn't get to my 47 target yesterday, so I am still in that, targeting $47 for my exit on Bank of America, and I'm still slightly up on that. I do have a stop loss in again this morning at 46.25. So I am going to protect it, make sure that I finish it in profit. In case we see a slide today, but I'm still targeting that $47 on those 2 moves. The other position I am still in is MSTU we talked about. It is down a little bit today. This one I'm in for the long haul, as I think MicroStrategy will climb back up. So that one I am still in at a nice profit, but going to hold that longer terms. Don't think I'll be scalping anything into the weekend unless I really see a scalp on a pumper here this morning. I don't plan on I plan on being fairly neutral going into the weekend. I'll still be in my NVIDIA position, and I'll still be in MicroStrategy, but I will look to exit my Bank of America position today. Don't want to hold that over the weekend. As I've talked about, tweet analysis is definitely outweighing technical analysis in the markets right now. You just got to be wary of those things. That's why we're advising people, right? Take profits a little quicker than you might have in the past, because, all it takes is one tweet one way or the other out of the White House or such, and, or Elon, and it's moving the markets tremendously. MSTU, Ron, that is Matthew Tuttle, his company, Tuttle Capital. That is a 2x long position on MSTR that I like. It started back here in November. I've traded it pretty successfully. It has pretty good liquid options also to trade. But if you are a fan of MicroStrategy, this is a way to get a leveraged 2x exposure to the upside. He does have one, I think it's MSTX, to the downside. That's not his. MSTX is one. That's Defiance's. I know that Tuttle has one too. Hold it one second. I can find that by going to. Here we go. Tuttle Capital. You know what? I'll just pull up his website. And in disclosure, Matthew Tuttle is a regular contributor here on Quasar Markets. He does a show every Tuesday and Thursday at 11:30 with Jeremy Vreeland. His company is Tuttle Capital Management. That does a bunch of ETFs. I would say everybody should sign up for his free newsletter, The Heat Formula. It comes every day. It's a great little AI newsletter that he's put together that comes out on a daily basis. And his ETFs are, he just went over $4 billion under management, which was really impressive to see. Here it is. MSTZ, I was so close. MSTZ is his. So if you're looking for downside protection against MicroStrategy position, MSTZ, and I typed in the wrong letter again, is his here. So not as much volume on this one, and you can see as it continues to go up, it's been sitting there. But again, if you're in a long Bitcoin position, you're in a long MicroStrategy position, you're looking for some options to hedge against, these would be some of the ways that you can do that, without doing perpetual futures, which are frowned upon by our US SEC still. So they're not offered here. That will be the next thing to keep an eye on, is to see if we see perpetual futures get approved for some of the exchanges here in the U.S. I think it's going to be an uphill battle for that. And the big part of that is those that have been watching this industry for a while know Sam Bankman-Fried, the largest criminal in the history of crypto, spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill in front of the Senate and House talking about how that was such a great system as his company FTX imploded and took a lot of the crypto market with it. So it is a sore spot still for many within the CFTC, which is where he really did most of the talk about that. So we'll see what we get there. Tick is still negative about 116, now down -4. Advanced decline continuing to drop down. So we only see 550 companies on the increase there. So we're still sliding down a little bit. We have seen a bounce back by QQQ. It has gotten back over to the green, and that's led mostly by Apple here, which is up 0.5%, and Tesla being up 0.5 really leading those tech stocks to the north side so far today. See what other pumpers we have going on so far. PDD, Temu's parent company here, getting a little bit of love today, up about 2.33%. So we have seen a nice move up by, PDD over the last couple of days. Keep an eye. Let's see what Bob is doing. Same thing we're seeing. So China's getting a little bit of love today. Baba up here again. Baidu up also almost 1 percentage point. So we are seeing a little bit of a move up. I haven't seen really any news releases out of China overnight. I'm sure my man Steve Flanagan will have any kind of input there if there is when we're on at 9. Man, I took that profit. Again, we never get mad about taking profit, but I took profit too quick on that Coinbase trade. I do want to point out, though, one thing that I would be a little bit wary about that changes my long-term outlook on Coinbase. While I still think they are best in class in a lot of different areas when it comes to the blockchain and crypto industry, one of their big advantages or big money makers that was looked at for them is they are the prime custodian for many of the ETFs, for many of the large corporations holding Bitcoin. That was done through their Coinbase Prime Trust custody services. As I mentioned earlier, now that they've revoked that SAB and announced that banks can custody crypto and digital assets for their clients, that moat is going to get knocked down pretty quickly. I'll be looking at Bank of New York Mellon, which was heavy and hot on the Bitcoin custody trail before they got issued that sort of kick in the teeth last year by the SEC. They had already been approved by New York's DFS to custody Bitcoin. So that would be one that I would think could be a bigger mover here to the upside. So we definitely has me a little bit more wary on my long-term outlooks on Coinbase than I did. I do think it's still positive, but I did think over the next 6 months that will give them a little bit more of a downside over the next 6 months as this sort of plays out. Yeah, Zora, but like I said, it's hard when tweet analysis is outweighing, technical analysis in a matter of a second. All it takes is a tweet from Elon, a tweet from the president right now, and it's got markets spooked one way or the other. And it makes it, I'd rather play things tighter to the vest and make sure that I'm locking in the profits. That's why I'm doing that with Bank of America. Normally, I would not have a stop loss as close as it is right now, but I'm just like, you know what? I'm in profit. I want to end with a win. I don't want to take this, over the weekend. So I raised my stop loss there, to 46.25. And, that's, you can't get angry with a profit. It's one thing that Scott Bowers taught us at Prosper over the years, right? Big Beats taught us here over the months and, years that I've been involved with him. Absolutely. Mr. Flanagan, you just nailed it. I was just about to say, and Mr. Flanagan, who has given us over 40 years of experience trading at JP Morgan. 43. He gets mad if I don't give him credit for all of them. 43 years of trading currencies. That's right. Don't look back. Move on to the next one and go from there. But don't be afraid also, jump back into a trade. If you see a pullback come to the right level that you're looking at, I don't want you to chase FOMO, that's for sure, but don't be afraid of that either. We are still seeing advanced decline pick up a little bit here. So we are seeing a little more strength, and we're seeing it in the markets where QQQ is now up almost a 1/10 of a percentage point. And the SPY is up a 1/10 of a percentage point. Bitcoin trying to climb above 106 here. Let's take a look and see if treasuries are doing anything here this morning. Treasury is actually sliding. They're about standard. They haven't moved much, so not much of a move there. Man, I just want to see gold break to that new all-time high. Would love to see that get a move here above. But it just doesn't seem like it wants to make that move so far. We are seeing a move up by gas and oil. I said most of the talk recently has got that aimed sort of in that way. Let's take a look at what's moving the most to the downside so far. Texas Instrument that Ron pointed out to us, one of the big losers, CF Industries Holding. I'm not that familiar with that company at all. CSX, so they had earnings yesterday, so that means we're not seeing that great of earnings come out of the railroads. They had a top line revenue miss and an EPS miss. Again, that's CSX, one of the large shipping companies out there. Amex was moving down on their earnings report too, and they had again, this is where we talk about it. They came in pretty much right at expected for earnings on American Express and moving down. I did have an article on that. Again, I apologize. My internet is moving slow today. It was down all morning. So with CSX, the railroads company, fourth quarter adjusted earnings matched revenue forecasts, but the fact that Union Pacific had much better earnings. Again, that's what we're seeing. It's a matter of earnings. Good earnings are doing what they should do and move things up, but earnings that just hit. It's not taking a miss to move the market down. If earnings are just sort of hitting level at a where they were expected, it's also moving it down. Amex was down 2.4%. Credit card company said they narrowly topped Wall Street estimates. I'm looking for that article. They did say that Amex card users were up. There it is. That they had been. Try this one more time. Amex credit card users have spent 8% more in the fourth quarter than they did a year ago. And even more so, again, if we do what's called a channel check, they've spent even 13% more on flights. I talked about this yesterday. I was asking people if they thought AAL was a buy after their earnings report came in. Again, they had decent earnings, decent guidance, nothing really out of the ordinary except for that they thought, that their gas prices for their was an issue. And you can see they dropped all the way down to 1660. They have recovered a little bit here to 1695. They really didn't recover till this morning. And that earnings report was yesterday morning. So, we are seeing that little bit of a move back up by American. I saw UAL was a fairly big mover here this morning. Up about 2.66%. So, my takeaway from Amex wasn't so much about theirs, was about the fact that, again, what we heard from Delta, what we heard from UAL, what we had heard from AAL was all, again, right, that demand for airline travel is up. It seems to be just growing. We saw a industry-wide article yesterday saying that if you're looking to travel this year, that you should get your tickets before May because they feel that there's going to be another huge increase on prices, and their prices just continue to rise. I was looking at flights recently, and it's crazy how far they have moved up. Another thing I was looking at Amex, I like looking at the credit card companies because they give us a look into a lot of different industries and into sort of what the consumer has going on. Something I thought was good too is they actually lowered their amount for credit losses. So for sort of bad credit cards that don't get paid, last year they wrote off about 1.4 billion. This year they were down to 1.3 billion, which surprised me a little bit because we have heard a lot, right, that people's credit card bills are jumping up, and that there's this threat of a sort of pullback there, but we're not necessarily seeing it so far. It hasn't taken place to that extent so far. And that's sort of being said there. And again, they keep pointing out that there is increased spending and accelerated card fee growth greater than their net interest income. So again, it is credit card fees that are driving Amex's business right now. And they're looking for an 8 to 10% revenue growth for 2025, which would put them in the 71.3 billion on revenue. So again, Amex, a company I like. In general, I think that they do a good job. They were, the only thing that I would say Amex hasn't done, and that could be a headwind for them in the future, is they refuse to get involved in the blockchain space and digital asset space in any way. They've done very little testing so far. They've done very little sort of sandbox things to be ready, as a lot of these other companies, especially Visa and MasterCard, have done, where you've already seen they've done years of testing with blockchain and digital assets. There. So we want to make sure that continues to be the case, that we are continuing to see that innovation, because TradFi and, we saw the CEO of Bank of America at Davos came out and said that financial legacy companies are biting at the bit to get into that digital asset world once regulations come a little bit more in line. I've been tweeting a lot the last couple of days about how we need these regulations in place. I had a nice talk with Caitlin Long, the CEO of Custodia, a digital asset bank here in the United States. who was one of the people that got all of Wyoming's blockchain and cryptocurrency laws into place. She was in charge of that lobbying group, and then went on to found Custodia. And she comes from Goldman Sachs and the legacy financial and banking world. She is extremely worried. So is Preston Price, who came from that world, and a few other folks that really came from that legacy banking system. And what they've talked about is nobody is a king of leverage to the way that banks are. And if we don't get the right rules and regulations in place, they will rehypothecate Bitcoin to death. So, that is the push that we're seeing. I think we're in the right spot for it. I think we will say it. Have a great weekend, Ron. So we'll keep an eye on that. Tick continuing to slide a little bit here. Our advanced decline staying fairly neutral at now less than 200. So we are seeing more drop, and the Dow now down about 3/4 of a percentage point here, or excuse me, 0.3 of a percentage point here, and sliding to lows of the day. So we are seeing a little bit of a move down here on the Dow. Mag 7 all tend to be moving to the upside except for Netflix and Microsoft. But even there, Microsoft moving to the upside since the open here this morning. It had been down as low as 441 before bouncing back to this 445 area. NVIDIA pulling back a little bit. So the ones that had early morning strength seem to be sort of topping off here. NVIDIA was above 148 a little while ago. Apple's starting to slide a little bit here too. Google bucking that trend. Google's been sitting towards its all-time high here for a decent amount of time. I think if we look at the daily chart there too, we're going to see when it does this. That's a tough one. That looks a little bit like what I call the Bart Simpson. You get the move up, and then you got his haircut. Unfortunately, what you usually see is that on this. I mean, I'm not here to fade Google, but that is the case. That is what I call the famous Bart Simpson look, and it tends to lead us to the downside. It's trying. And why I say that is what happens is that it tries to break on consecutive levels a high, and it can't. I mean, that's what you really want to talk about. It's a fun way to draw basically a multi-top. So that's all that is. Crypto, Bitcoin trying to bounce above 106,000 here. Solana is the one that's trying to move back up towards its all-time high here. It hit 270, 295, we know, is its all-time high. A couple of the meme coins catching some wind today also. Pepe up about 4%. Not much to the negative side. Bitcoin's dominance down, so the alts are growing a little bit faster than the Bitcoin is this morning. I was watching AGAP organization before open this morning, up about 10%, but pulling back here. It looked like it wanted to move. I wasn't nimble enough on that one. AVGO seen a nice move up here today. AVGO Broadband, nice move up here. Again, another one that, all-time high at 250 here. This is one I'd be looking more so, again, probably on a short than a long. Zora, have a great time with the fur babies. We will see you on Monday. I do see my main man, Mr. Currency himself, Stephen Flanagan, has joined the room. I'm going to bring him in here in 1 second. Mr. Flanagan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Howard. I hope the viewers are all getting ready for a great weekend ahead.
I hope so too. So, been an interesting day. What do you think about Mr. President there, Trump's statements towards the Fed yesterday?
Well, this is the environment. You've been talking about it all morning. We've got to get ready for this new environment and the rapid response from your electronic machinery that dominates our trading. Trump said, I would rather not put tariffs on China. And then he signaled the need for an immediate interest rate cut. I mean, you just can't get more action in a marketplace than
Yeah,
comments like that.
it really is. It's one of those that I just couldn't. I don't know what to say anymore. I put out a thing. It had a picture of Jerome Powell like standing there holding his head like this that someone had taken years ago, and that's what he must have been looking at. I'm going to demand that they cut interest rates.
So, some advice that I would offer in markets like this, we would have expressions in a trading room. Sometimes check your brain at the door when you walk in, right? You're not paid to think, you're paid to react. The bottom line is my advice is study the price because the data don't lie. Follow the price action. The comments are the noise pollution. Watch the way the market reacts. Let me give you a great example. We've been talking about dollar yen and Bank of Japan and the expectation of a rate hike. Now, we talked about this a month ago. Everybody seemed to come to the table in the last couple of trading days. But the dollar yen, they raised interest rates. So why is this important? Because it's the highest level of interest rates since 2008.
Yeah.
And it was considered a bullish or a hawkish rise in rates. Yet, why isn't dollar yen lower?
Right, because last time they did this was this move right here that we saw. It was dramatic and it was immediate.
And that was intervention there. So that was, a heavy hand of the Bank of Japan, the law.
Right.
But this particular case, look, I've been trading over 43 years, plus now that I'm retired, still trading. And yet I can honestly say, hey, I got this wrong. I thought we'd see dollar yen significantly lower. I was looking for, a 153 first stop. Now, I'm not throwing that out. I still think we could get this, but the knee-jerk reaction that we've seen is, look, I outthought this.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to stress is that this is a currency. I think when I start next week, you've got to have dollar yen on your desktop because this is telling us something. I like to emphasize money moves first.
Yeah.
Why isn't dollar yen lower? My quick assessment, that's how much demand is in the marketplace for the dollar.
Right.
And
we've
what does
seen, we've
that mean?
seen that.
What
The
does
King
that mean?
dollar is not dead by any means.
Right. And what does it
It
mean
was
for
it
the
yesterday.
US?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
means for the US that there's still a wave of money moving in. Capital is flowing into the US. So don't get head faked out with this dollar correction. 107, 107. I think we talked about the mid level of 107. Today I went in a little bit tighter, and I'm saying anywhere from 106.40 up to 107.40, 106.60 to 107.40 is a solid zone of support in the Dixie, in the dollar index. And that's where I want to reestablish my longs in the dollar. Looking at the euro dollar, which is the largest component, somewhere around a 105.50 or 106.50, this is a zone of selling. Don't get head faked out here. This is not a dollar move back down for any other reason. capital, and that's what dollar yen is telling us. Get prepared for next week. To me, it looks like something's about to break here.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the article in Market Watch today. They were talking about how there has just been a huge historical influx of foreign money and foreign retail trader money coming into the US stock market. And they're pointing out, as I think you are, that historically that's not a good thing. When the retail, because again, what's happening now is everybody's throwing that same fishing pole in the same place. And if we have institutional and retail doing that, who's going to jump first to the other side? Institutional, right?
That's right. And this is, the currencies markets, what I've always talked about are the tectonic plates underneath of the financial markets globally. And when they begin to move or crack, you get an earthquake. Well, I'm not necessarily a bear here at all. In fact,
Right.
what we could be on the precipice here, because when you're at highs, a natural reaction is, I can't buy here. I want to
I got
sell.
a short. I got a short.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a natural trader's reaction. So my thought here is that just the opposite. You could be on a precipice here where next week things just begin to take off, at least in the US point of view. And that could be a stronger dollar. That's why I'm watching this dollar yen. My education in the markets tells me I should be looking for a dollar yen to trade lower.
Right.
The dollar index and everything is showing me that the overbought nature of the market, the dollar, is wanting to relieve some pressure. But in a very bullish market, that pressure could be released in 1 or 2 or 3 days. And if you look at the tops that we the move down in the dollar index, you're seeing, a very sharp move down. It could very quickly base out here and reverse. So
Yeah, I mean, you can see the move that it made back, in mid-December, 106, 645 to 108.5 in one trading session.
right.
So,
And I look at next week as being a very big week. I want to follow this very closely because one of the lessons I've learned over so many years of trading was that in the first 2 to 3 weeks of January, whatever move gets initiated, as everybody comes in, because everybody starts at the zero line
right.
to start January. So people come out and they all start to put positions on. And what we do is we find that after the first 3 weeks of January, we unwind for the next quarter what everybody jumped into. So I'm watching
Right.
carefully. I think we're at that point. Um, I'm highly suspect that we could see perhaps a little bit more of a prolonged correction here. But I'm also looking very much to take full advantage of this correction because it will reverse rapidly, as we see with these two comments from Trump in the last 24 hours. So
I love it. BTFD. Buy that effing dip, baby.
Love that one, Howard. I haven't heard that. But let's look briefly. UK, we had services, the PMI slightly higher. Now, this is January's preliminary. Same in Germany. We had the Eurozone slightly higher of the in the PMI. US, I think our number was also in that zone. Yeah. So this is giving a little bit hope to the global recovery, which I don't buy at all. I don't want to buy into Europe at these levels because Europe has a tremendous downside. If you notice, the German government actually changed their 2025 growth projection, going from a 1.1% growth to a 0.3. Okay, so the patient barely has a heartbeat.
Right. Yeah,
and
you
if
better
that's
get the defibrillator going.
That's right. So I'm not buying into this. I want to look at Eurozone consumer confidence that was out, was sharp, was about the same, minus 14.2. And the UK consumer confidence came out at minus 22 from a minus 17. So brief correction. That's what I would leave you with. And the currency markets are indicating that to me very clearly now.
Yeah, I mean, I love that analysis, especially when it comes to that USD, yen trade, because we have been. We were talking about that. We were looking at what happened last time they raised interest rates, how it moved that market so much, so fast, and there. And yeah, I mean, I think this is the currency markets telling you, don't buy the hype. The dollar is going back up, and the dollar is still king.
That's right. And we could see an appreciating yen. It may not be against the dollar, and that
Right.
may be what it's telling me today. I didn't see the move down, although if you expand that yen chart to a weekly, what's interesting, and this is why I hope to educate the viewers here with currency markets. They allow you a little bit, you can day trade them, you can minute trade them, but in general, they allow a little bit more time to formulate your positioning. If you look at those moves up in the past on a weekly chart, you can see that if you blow them out, then you can see there's a brief pause after a top is made before the collapse.
Yeah, they all have rounding tops. It's not a direct thing there. Yeah.
Which I'm thinking is the same in dollar yen here today. But what dollar yen could be telling me is that the demand for dollars, after all, SoftBank is Japanese, and a lot of Japanese money is moving into the US as well. What this could be telling me is that the yen is not going to appreciate versus the dollar. It may go sideways trading pattern. Maybe look at the other currency pairs, such as a long yen or a short euro, a long yen, a short Aussie, a long yen, a short sterling. Maybe that's the better way to play it. So
I'm adding it to my watch list right now, sir.
So alert for Monday. Let's watch this carefully. By the time New York gets in to start trading, you'll have the Asian market and the European markets will have fully traded, and you'll have a real good idea of what's going to come into the New York market.
Absolutely. I've been surprised, although, and looking a little bit more into what's going on in the stocks, it's been one or two moves like Novo Nordisk that got its new weight loss drug that are moving the index up. It isn't a wide run. It's what we saw here in the US, right, during the last year, where the Mag 7 dragged everything up and other stocks went sideways. And that's what I've noticed there. I don't know enough about the Nikkei to break down the big ones there to know what has been leading there. I will say their stock market's had about 5 or 6 days of a nice recovery also, though.
Yeah, I've been saying for me, number one is US, but number two, and not that far behind, is Japan, because Japan is now making the changes. 25 plus years of fighting a deflationary environment. You're suddenly seeing Japan come out the other side. Hence, this could be a great place to be. Why I'm advocating, I'm watching dollar yen. I like the yen. I just may be in the wrong currency as the offset.
Yeah. Okay. US, we got FOMC rates on Wednesday. Durable goods, pretty big week next week for economic data. Do you think maybe this is where we get the economic data actually drives the market, whereas this week it's all been earnings reports?
Yes, I do. And it'll be earnings next week as well, too. But I do think that the economic data is becoming more and more important in the U.S. side of things, because any weakness in the data, which I think we have been kind of seeing, that is going to reinforce this idea that maybe the Fed does have rate cuts in mind. I mean, when you start to hear, as we did 3 weeks ago, people talking about rate rises in the United States, there's a total disconnect here.
Right.
But what we do have to look at is most likely the Fed is on pause next meeting, although President Trump might have a little bit of a differing opinion on that. But we do know one certainty next week is that on January 30, the ECB meets and they will be cutting.
Right. They better.
And that opens up that opens up the interest rate differential further, and that's why this dollar decline here. When we look at the index, the Dixie, we note that the euro dollar is over 50% of that index. So watch the euro dollar. And then following week, we have Bank of England, and they're no doubt going to cut as well. So if the U.S. just holds and the rest of the world cuts, it aggravates the interest rate differentials, and it puts more strength behind the king dollar scenario.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people misread because they felt that Trump is such a fan of big banks that higher for longer on rates was going to happen because that's a benefit to banks. But what we're hearing from the credit card companies and everything is it isn't necessarily the rate, it's the amount of money that people are borrowing that matters. So lower rates means people borrow more money. It gets, that pie becomes bigger. Maybe the profit isn't as big per loan. But it brings people back into those markets, the mortgage market, car buying markets and things like that.
Yes, that's a good point. And it highlights something that I've gone out on my Twitter handle, S Flanagan 1979, in advocating is that the central banks are so far behind. The only way out of the inevitable debt crisis that is building throughout the world is to grow. How do you grow? You've got to stimulate growth, and that's either monetary stimulus or fiscal stimulus. Hence why I say the central banks of the world got to get out of this higher for longer silly mantra. They've got to start getting involved and getting out in front of the marketplace and lowering rates, because we need to stimulate growth, especially when you look at all this money that's now. I listened to Steve's Twitter from Davos, Switzerland, where he is. And, he's just basically showing us where all this investment money is looking. And right now that's in the U.S. The U.S. is going to grow. The rest of the world has got to get in line here. Otherwise, we are going to create some major imbalances. Now, to the viewers, you haven't seen a currency imbalance in many, many years. I'm talking two and a half decades. Well, you go back into when I started trading in the 80s and 90s, and currency markets can dictate domestic monetary policies.
Right.
So much so that before the euro, the head of the Bank of France actually came out and said, off with the head of speculators.
Right.
So watch the currency markets. This is an explosive year. I believe it's king dollar all the way. Watch for your opportunities to get involved in a dollar type play. That could simply be from a outsider, just to have a heavier weighting in their U.S. portfolio. That's at least my views as a guy on the sidelines trading in the retail market like everyone else.
Yeah, right. Except that you did it for 43 years at the highest levels of the institutional side. So there's a little bit more at stake there. I'm not going to call you a regular retail trader. Sorry. You don't get that title yet back yet.
All right. Well, hopefully I can provide some insights to the
Absolutely.
listeners.
Our retail traders, people like myself that don't have that years and years of experience at doing this. Any other final words for us this week to take us out?
Well, the only thing is I've talked MEX, and I just want to make sure at 2020, I still have, we can't seem to bounce in between these levels every time we talk. 2002, 20.02 on the downside, a break there, and something's up. A 20.88 on the upside, a break there, and something's up. Why I highlight the MEX? At a 10% currency, look how sharp this has come down just in the day. Because as the dollar takes a sideways pattern, 10%, if you've got available money, you're jumping into a long MEX position just to simply earn the points, we call it, of holding MEX versus the dollar, holding MEX versus any low interest rate currency.
Yeah, so look for that one to break. It will give you an idea of what's going on with the tariffs for sure and policy.
And it certainly indicates money is going to move first. And that's the point I highlight, that you will see some sort of knee-jerk reaction as a result of it.
Okay. And as we know, sometimes not money not moving is what the signal is, as we saw with the USD Japan move, because we did expect that huge explosion to one side. So that to me tells a big story. That's my huge takeaway from our talk today, that I hadn't really thought about. I just said, oh, I guess we sort of overestimated what would happen. No, that reaction is dollar is still king right now.
I would concur with that view, and that's why I say let's watch dollar yen next week, because as we start trading on Monday, that could be the telltale signal as to what's going to happen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, as always, Mr. Currency, for joining us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 o'clock. We will be back today at 1 o'clock with Charlie Moon and Michael Shore from Prosper Trading Academy, live from the floor of the SIBO. Always a great one. Today they are actually going to discuss... Oh, they're going on the hot seat. So you guys get to ask them rapid fire to take a look at tickers, and they're going to do it live on the air. So it should be a great show. And I will be back with Big Beat Monday morning at 9 a.m. Have a great weekend, everybody.